your age, or rather sometime between 25 to 30, I intuitively felt some things about this world. Through experience of a family, of my family, I couldn't understand many things. As a result, I just had fear that was implanted in me. And later, you know, while you're still young, there is another passionate life, you know. Some people sort of turn their attention towards that alone. But it so happened that through this passionate life, I found myself in, how shall I put it, among people for whom philosophical discussions mattered. And they produced a unique impression upon me, because it was not because I have any gift or any capability or my education. I was not really ready to do something about it too. But it seemed to me that this is the only possible explanation of the world for me, both metaphysical and rational, more than literature, more than arts. And somehow I felt that this state of human mind that is called philosophical or metaphysical, I cherished it. And the secular philosophers that I came to learn at that time, I suppose it was absolutely excellent at the time. And at the time it was and still is a unique, typically Russian value and cultural value and universal value. Because what happened about philosophers and to philosophical thought under stark propaganda, and it is very hard to explain. It may be been hard to even understand until it might be possible. So I just have this, want to share my feeling with them, cherish this, that I stand in awe about this excellent philosopher, Vadim Mezhuev, who traveled here to speak before you, who in point of fact, I don't know, he spent his life as philosophy, and he thinks about philosophy alone. He thinks about this language, he thinks about in this language, about this language, and he would not, he's not keen to switch to any other language that he does not even find interesting. So you will now hear his philosophical deliberation about the topic that we put on our agenda, future and freedom. Can you hear me all right? Thank you very much. I want to welcome everybody and say hello. To some extent, Lena has already said some things, and in my presentation probably I will say some things in response to what was discussed by the first presenter today. I saw some presentations online, and I will probably also have a discussion with those speakers who spoke before me here as I watched online broadcasts. And I will also discuss matters that are pertinent for Russia, but I will not speak as an economist, as a political science or politician. No, I will discuss this method as a philosopher. The question is, does really a philosopher know something that other specialists don't know about it? Probably yes, because we do know something. Because philosophy, we should say some words about it. I shall not deliver a lecture about philosophy, but I must sort of introduce myself in this capacity. Philosophy is first of all, foremost, about the art to raise questions. It's a special type of questioning. And it's very important to understand, you know, you sometimes studied it at university, and what was taught in our university as the fundamental question, which it is not really a fundamental question, what comes first, mind or matter. But knowing how to ask a question sometimes matters more than knowing an answer to this question. But philosophical questions have some special features about themselves. They don't have answers that science can give. To these philosophical questions, you cannot give a science-based, evidence-based answer by confirming it with experiments, referring to experience. Because if science could give an answer to philosophy, philosophy is not a science for that matter. If you could give science-backed answer, then philosophy would not be needed. Then scientists and researchers would raise this question, provide evidence and science-based answer, and that would be it. So philosophers could discuss any matters. They might discuss nature, but at that they understand something else rather than what people that are in natural sciences think nature is. That's why we have naturphilosophy or philosophy of nature, amongst other things. Philosophers can discuss history, and philosophers did discuss history, but it is not quite the history that historians study. So there is historiosophy alongside it with philosophers may discuss man, but it's not what economists, sociologists, and even lawyers discuss. So alongside with scientific anthropology, there is philosophical anthropology. So whichever area of knowledge we look at, it will be split or divided into philosophy and a specialist science. For example, there is political science and there is political philosophy, and so on and so forth. So this division between them is very important. What is it that the philosopher can see? Well, philosophers certainly, why do we exist? There are answers where science can give no answer. If science could do it all and give all answers to all questions, including, amongst other things, the country, the fates of a country, and us, then philosophers would have nothing to do here. Probably some of you, when they studied a course of history of philosophy, you might remember that Kant once tried to raise or even enumerate these questions which philosophy seeks to give an answer to. We can certainly expand these questions, but he was very exact in his formulation. The first question, what can I know? Because man is thinking creature. Hardly any science can give you an answer about some actual limits or borders of knowledge. Science thinks that it can give answers to all questions, but there are limitations. So science does have certain limits. But where are these limits? What are the things that scientists can surely not know the answer to? This is what philosophers discuss. This is critique of pure mind. The second question that Kant formulated was, what must I do? Scientists can tell you what they do, what they study. They can study, say, human acts, human doings, but what he should or must do, it seems like very queer. He owes it to whom? For what purpose? So this is in the critique of practical mind. This is what Kant posed as a matter of ethics. And the third question is what I can hope for. This is a question that I would like to discuss. This is a question about the future. Because if we think, or it turns we learn something, and if we act without any purpose whatsoever, not posing any goals before us or objectives, then all our thoughts and acts are simply senseless, have no sense. As Kant put it, and if you put all these three questions together, this was not what I put it as Kant. And if we put all these three questions together, we will take an answer. They will get an answer to what man is. Man is somebody who's thinking, somebody that is doing something, something that is aspiring for. science cannot give an answer to this question. When science can give an answer about the future, what can I hope for? What am I doing it all for? It either went into utopic thinking or went for, I will discuss it later, it would reach what we call the end of history. The end of history is an idea put forward by the 21st century. History is over, the future is clear, we will see endless repetition of same things. Our future is portrayed in such a, way that modern man sees it. If you have seen a film by German, it's difficult to be a god, then you will see how hard it may be. Philosophers used to speak about the bright future. The future was, as Voltaire put it, one day it will all become better. That was the main hope and the main belief of enlightenment. For that matter, bright future is something that people in the Enlightenment era invented. They really believed that was an idea of progress. They believed that history moves in some happy, bright future for man. A totally different matter that we could have different ideas about what this future would look like. But it was clear that the future was better than the present. From mid-19th century, things turned, and now the main word for enlightenment was progress. The main word of modern philosophy about time and man, the main word would be crisis. Crisis came to replace progress. All modern post-classical philosophy, it's all about the crisis that hit society, man, social, anthropological, you name it. We'll now discuss how it and why it happened. But as I put it, I was telling you these things to show you that there are some questions where it is easy to give a science-backed answer, scientific answer, because when science tries to project the future, try to envisage what it would be like, science really does not speak about the future. I want to explain to you what I mean by future. Say, if an astronomer cannot prove, let me give an example, that say in such and such year, in 2150, we shall see eclipse. Tell me, is it a matter about the future? Certainly not. We surely know that next year winter will come after autumn and so on. It's not future in the historic sense of the word. It's about a certain repetition of events. Future in the exact sense of the word for historian, for historic thinking. I don't know, do historians contemplate future? The future, it's, shall we see something happen that has never happened before? Shall we see something in the future which has never been witnessed before? Then we can speak about historical future. If we see things that have already taken place, it's just an idea that time is flowing, but it repeats itself. And this is where we will now move over. This is actually my main debate with historians, and I want to somewhat discuss it in greater detail, and then we'll move over to Russia. In my time, please understand where we argue with historians, because since I will discuss the future and history, it's all about future, historical time, certainly not astronomical, biological, physical time. But about time, there are many problems about time. Amongst you, I'm sure there are historians. Maybe you will give me an answer. I once used to work with our great historians. He is no longer, he's gone, medievist Aaron Yakovlevich Gurevich. You may have heard his name. At that time, he was working on a book that became very known, well-known since, Categories of Medieval Culture. He worked in our institute. He was never employed by anybody, and he absolutely had total disgust for philosophers. He was a brilliant historian, medievist. He was expert in Scandinavian studies. He says, I do not understand philosophers. We historians, in order to claim something about history, we spend our life in archives, we study monuments, documents. You know, you do not do anything of this kind. And you teach us something about history. Where do you get it from? With this polemics between us, it was then published in print. in the journal Вопросы философии. He says, well, I can't get it. Okay, you speak about your own ideas, but when you begin interfering with our matter, with history, what can you claim? What can you tell a historian? Okay, what things you can tell us that I do not know? As I told you, a philosopher knows something about history that is not known to historian. And Aron Yakovlevich thought that the objective for historian is to look at history at a certain epoch, okay, let it be medieval or ancient Greece, whatever, from the perspective of a man that lived in that time. Try to be objective, a man who lived at that time, not with our own perspective. So, Aron Yakovlevich, the name of your book, you made 3 mistakes in the very name. Which are they? First of all, medieval man did never call themselves medieval man. Very much like people who lived in ancient Greece, they thought they were very much contemporary to their time. This is what we call the medieval or ancient Greece. It was not the name of the epoch, it's what we call that epoch. Very often there's something we could do. We say, for example, the Chinese civilization. Not one single Chinese would think of calling his civilization as the Chinese civilization. This is the European name. We call Russia civilization. Let us try to say Russia is a 19th civilization, 19th century. You would be immediately criticized harshly for that. First mistake. Medieval man did not know any culture. This is where he would agree with me. He says, yes, exactly. I wanted category of medieval mind, but I was afraid they will accuse me of idealism. And secondly, they'd never thought in categories. Even language lets you down. You can't talk about medieval man using medieval language, can you? So the question that any historian faces, and not only historian, well, first of all, because my main polemics was with historians. The main point about polemics is, who are you in history then? Are you looking at history from mass? Can you understand what you are? What is your own perspective in history? And depending on what you are in history, this is your outlook on the past. If you're a zero, a non-existent entity in history, then it's just an object of your research, you know, like for entomologists who say studies, for example, insects. He's not an insect, and once you pose a question in this way, who am I in history? What is my place in history? You would stop being an historian and would immediately become a philosopher. Because a philosopher seeks an answer to the question, who am I and who are we? This is the question. In philosophic language, it's called the matter of self-consciousness. But each person has his or her own concept of I, of ego. Oh, when I discuss it with my students, I said, tell me please, how can we see ourselves in the mirror? Why do we recognize ourselves in a drawing or photo, but animals cannot identify themselves with their own photos? Man actually looks at the world as a mirror. The people who lived in primitive era, they only saw the mirror and about their tribal forces, the so-called solar myth. Myth is first form of self-identification, ability to watch the world as a mirror of oneself. This is what philosophers have, actually. Scientists look at the world, and this is where you will know, look at the world through a transparent glass. Now, do you see the difference? I look at the world and I see whatever it is, not ourselves. A philosopher sees anywhere and in anything oneself. Philosopher perceives the world as his own mirror. And the same is true of history. Philosopher, whatever he wants to know about ancient times, he will know from antiquity. But he will ask this question not to Greek. He would say, tell me please, Greek, what were you? Whereas philosopher would say, Greek, will request it to an ancient Greek, tell me please, who am I? Actually, a person who lived in ancient Greece never thought of it. He had his own future, but the art of interpretation is about finding an answer to this question. This is an art of interpretation, of trying to find an answer in the past to a question I raise before myself today. This is how a philosopher looks at history. He does actually quite opposite to historian. Now, if you got my point, there's different. We are now coming closer to Russia. If you understood this difference, then you would see and understand that both about Russia, I can raise the question in the same manner. Who should I ask? What is it, Russia? But this is how philosophers contemplate it. What is Russia? And they give an answer. We should say that in the 19th century, and this is very important to know about our history, the answer to the question of Russia was not given by sociologists or economists. Political scientists didn't exist at the time. It were philosophers who gave an answer to this question. Berdyaev wrote it, a question about Russia, it's a historiosophical question. But using economic categories, sociological categories, legal categories, well, I could say very many important things about ourselves, but in answer to the question, who am I, will never become known this way. In the same way, so that you should understand what I'm talking about, let's look at a different example. Try using economical, sociological, legal categories to give an answer to the matter, what is it, China? Well, you can say many things. Economists could speak for hours about modern China, sociologists too, although I do not know if there is sociology in China at all. But still, an answer to the question lies elsewhere, not with them. Well, certainly it's about culture. Well, so the main question about Russia, it's not about economy. It's not even about politics. It's certainly about culture. And this is where we shall find an answer to the question, what is it, Russia, and what is going on to it about its culture, and why exactly that is happening to it. And I will add on to this. Culture, and this is something that needs to be known, this is the main word, the key word of the 20th century. In which sense? The main word I will later tell you. It's the main word, at least in the terminology of science and philosophy, and arts and philosophy. Let me compare you. The main word, the key word of the 18th century was the word nature. And all the answers, they were sought for in nature. Nature. This is what we should ask about it all. That was the viewpoint of the 18th century. The main word of the 19th century becomes society and history. This is, as Foucault puts it, it's an age of historical history. History is a late discovery. It was discovered quite recently. Many nations do not live in history. You must know what it is to live in history. And this is where sociology rose in the 19th century. This is an idea that man is a public creature, is a social creature, sorry. This is, as Marx put it, all social relations put together. And at the turn of the 20th century, they come about what they call all arts and science about culture. They discovered a more in-depth layer. And they realized that the fundamental basis of historic places, it's not about economics, about politics, or even the state. Or you keep telling society, state, but much more fundamental is the culture. Well, you can give a very simple explanation for that. How can this be tested? Try to, say, rent somebody else's models. Try to apply economic and political models that are not proper for Russia, say democracy, market, and try to move it elsewhere. And for some reason it either does not work or gives an opposite result. Models were transposed. All institutions seem to be there, but it all works in the very opposite way. Why is that the case? Culture matters. Culture is different. Culture is different. The element of culture is not deciphered yet. It's not about mentality. They said codes, mentality, values, they're all words. You should understand, we still do not know how it all works. We have a good understanding about how nature, how state and society work, but as to culture, we're still in our young years. At least culture, it's something that to a certain extent predetermines a movement forward. Okay. Culture, okay, it's another culture that doesn't work. And then we come close, and I shall talk about it later on. They say, oh, humanities are lagging behind. Well, now they want to make everything catch up with, there is some cliometrics that is arising. What is the main discovery? What was the main discovery of science and arts in the 19th century? The main discovery of the humanities in the 19th century was there is no such thing as one culture that fits all. There are many cultures, and each school student knows about that. There is nothing new about it. But we should understand why this idea arose. Because it was once thought that we had only one culture, European culture, and others are barbarians. Then we had Lévi-Strauss thought there were three renaissances, and first renaissance discovered ancient Greece for us, or rediscovered. The second renaissance discovered the Orient, and the third discovery discovered a primeval culture. And it became clear, we all know about it actually, but of that matter we do not make the necessary conclusions. We fail to make all the conclusions. If there are many cultures around, then let's make a conclusion that how do I know which culture belongs to me out of these? If it's alone, one and only, then it's clear.
When it's only one, then what I know about culture is my culture. That's it. So then Descartes is right. So because what I think is my culture is my culture. So from the viewpoint of Descartes, there's only one culture, European culture. That's from his viewpoint. But if there are many cultures, what do we make of it then? So then we have people from different countries sitting here, and each one represents his culture, his country. So let's assume that we associate ourselves with the Russian culture. So we think we are a Russian culture. On what basis? What are the grounds to think that way? So if there are many cultures, then knowledge ceases to serve a criteria of my belonging to a culture. So I can know Islam, but it doesn't mean that I'm a Muslim. So I can be well versed in Chinese culture, but it doesn't follow that I am part of the Chinese culture. So on what grounds do I think that I am part of a Russian culture? Yeah, I am appealing to you. And so we know it's not by blood, it's not by genes. Because culture cannot be transferred by blood and or by genes, because it can be, may not. You don't have to be Russian, but you can be Russian from the viewpoint of culture, and then you can be Russian and not to be part of the Russian culture. So then it's not blood and it's not genes. It's not biology. What is it then? So then usually they say language, because the language you speak. But then there are many problems immediately that occur. So I know cultures who speak the same language, but they belong to different cultures. So Portuguese, Spanish, Latin, and there are cultures that speak two languages. So Yiddish and another Jewish language. So that's because language is a very important indicator of culture. So but it's not accurate. It's not final. indicator. So very simple. So we live in the language in the world of we're all bilingual. So half of the world are bilingual. So if, for example, if a person speaks English, does it mean that he belongs to an English culture? No. And so, for example, we live in Russia, and the common language for everyone is the Russian language. But so then a guy from Bashkiria or Tatar may say, so that I speak Russian very well, but my culture is Bashkir culture or Tatar culture. So language is an important indicator of belonging to a culture. But there is something else. So some time ago, so Mr. Likhachev and I argued to him that culture is something that rests in your memory. That is in your traditions, as someone said. So I will tell you why it's not correct. Not altogether correct. Because I asked him a question. So I was a boy, and he was a great guy at that time. And I said, Mr. Likhachev, so does the culture include only things that relate us to the past? So they mean this as antiquity. It's an archaic component. Maybe culture is part of what we own in the present. Maybe the culture is something that connects us to the future. Maybe culture includes our goals, our objectives, our expectations, our ideals, and our fantasies, for that matter. And it's not only memory, and it's imagination as well. And then secondly, the most important part. So is it always that what I have in my memory, in my traditions, coincides with what I have as my objectives and goals? Maybe I want to abandon certain ideas. Maybe I'm not happy with something in the past. Maybe I want to criticize and to argue that I don't like it. Or maybe just I like something from other cultures and I want to borrow it and I want to bring it into my culture. So yes, it was not my culture. Now it's part of my culture because I like it. So that is why what is my culture and the issue, it's not so difficult. It's so difficult, so complicated, so convoluted. So because and each generation gives a different answer. Yeah, no. So you cannot just give one answer for all generations and for all times. And then you'll understand. So where the philosophers work and where the scientists work, and the realm of scientists and the realm of philosophers. So much depends on lineage, environment, upbringing, culture, education. Everything depends on that. And all this, so the scientists study that. So that's everything that doesn't depend on me and what I perceive, because I am here in this, by virtue of the fact that I live here, can be studied. But something depends on my choice. And something depends on me, not only because I just am here, just by force of circumstances as I'm here. Yeah. And but something I can take and something I can reject. So much depends. Something depends on my inner freedom. That's why the answer to the question, what is my culture? What my culture is, certainly it's factor of necessity is there, and then there is a certain factor of the freedom of choice. So the moment just we get into the realm of the freedom of choice, this is what the philosophers do. The philosophers, they are involved in a wonderful realm, which is located in the environment of freedom, and this freedom of choice depends on what I will be, what I will hope to be. Because if nothing depended on me, if everything was predetermined, if everything were predetermined, and so because the freedom, a future is a factor of my freedom. Because without freedom, it's just repetition going around in circles, no movement, going around in circles, going around the board. That's why philosophers work. So my freedom is my future. Okay, now if my choice depends on me to a certain extent, certainly on a limited extent, and there are many other factors that I have no control over. But so now let's move over to Russia. I think that the specifics of Russia is that Russia has not made this choice. It made it some time ago, but it has not remained true to that choice, loyal to that choice. Let me explain. It has not remained loyal to that choice. So in the history, let's get down to Russia now. So if you understand, this is a big prelude, because very important to understand just how this all works. Because I'm not a person who is involved in culture, so who studies culture, culturologist. Yeah, I'm not a culturologist. I'm not that guy. And in our history, there is one uncertain thing, so just if someone explains, I'll be happy. But there's one white spot, because when we talk about the history of Russia, we cannot say the same things what we're saying about the history of Europe, because the history of Europe is traditional. So the ancient history, antique history, Middle Ages, and the New Times. That's it. So, but the same things cannot be applied to the Russian history. You know? So very, very difficult division, and so the thresholds and so the watersheds between those periods very difficult. Can we divide Russia into those distinct periods, the same kind how we did it with Europe? Because philosophy is a big question. You need to select the question, because antiquity, Middle Ages, modern times. Can we divide Russia? Can you think that we can do that? Okay, from what time just we start the New Times? What? Okay, Peter the Great, the New Times, modernity. Okay, so you think that they're starting from, so we'll talk about that. So starting from, so, but I would just speak in modern language. Can we regard Russia a modern country? A modern country. So if we call ourselves a modern country, why just we've been modernizing non-stop and we cannot get properly modernized? What? Why is that? Because this is the biggest challenge of the Russian history, because why can't we go over this barrier, cover this barrier, which divides so then the old times and the new times? Right, why? So they've been 3 waves of modernization, 3 waves. And I will tell you about that a bit later. So there were 3 waves. So the first one started during the Peter changes. So it was Peter the Great was a great modernizer. So, and so I'm not. There are some elements of European type of modernization, but it's not. It's because he wanted to become a modern country, but not a European state. But the main result of the modernization of Peter the Great's reforms and Catherine the Great's reform was the Russia of St. Petersburg. So Russia of St. Petersburg. If you think that the St. Petersburg with its huge culture and the Golden Age and the Silver Age, and if you think that this history was a modern, this is the new times of Russia, if you think so, then we don't understand anything what happened afterwards. So what? So because you cannot get out of modern times. So you can get out from modern times to post-modern times. But how can we get back from modern times to pre-modern times? Because St. Petersburg time is uncompleted modernity that have not been brought to completion. They had no market, no modern. There was no modern economy. There was no civil society. There was no rule of law, and there was no there was no mind. There was only mentality. What was the difference between mentality and the brains? So because when the historian says mentality is scientific intellect, so you cannot call science mentality. But what's everything outside science is mentality. So, but there is a difference between mind and mentality. That's why we cannot understand Russia as a result, because there's no because we cannot see the difference between mentality and mind, because Russia has not yet ripened so that we could rationally understand it. So because Russia is still an object of philosophers' study, because what the philosophers were talking about Russia is a sign of backwardness of Russia. So because they always speak about collapses, debacles, ravines. So because when they talk about Russia, they say there's a series of failures, only failures. And so when we speak about that, because where we got, you see. So then the second wave of modernization. And so you can just call it just whatever, just please don't think that I'm a proponent of the Soviet times, but it was the second wave of modernization of Russia committed by non-democratic means. Yeah. So that was the modernization with the help of mobilized economy, but it was modernization. So the second wave was Soviet Russia. So it ended in a debacle. And so we couldn't cover the hurdle. Again, we failed to cover the hurdle. We didn't jump on it. So now the 90s, the third wave of modernization. So that's the most interesting. That was the third attempt to jump over that barrier. What did it end with? How did it complete? That's exactly right. Yes, what you said is right. And then here, I turn to liberals, because we have many people who have liberal points of view. Because it's time that you start to criticize yourself, self-criticize. Yeah, because liberalism is a great ideology, but when liberals start to do reforms, so they don't understand what liberal reforms are, and so we mix. So when we do market reforms in the 90s, so we mixed two things, our liberals. They mixed up two things. They mixed capitalism with the market. They started with the capitalism, and capitalism is it's an anarchy of market economy. So they started with the end. So they started not to create the market, but they started to create capitalists. And so they mixed two reforms, so an economic reform and a legal reform. So because they transfer to the market, it's not an economic reform, it's a legal reform, a movement to capitalism. So we should not have been making the private businessmen. We should first lay down the legal foundation for capitalism first. So I was arguing it in the 90s about that. So America was created not by industrialists and businessmen. Lawyers created America. Lawyers created America who wrote, who drafted the Constitution, who developed this, and within this legal system, within this framework, so then the market started to grow strong, because the capitalism is a product of law and not the source of law. Besides, without law, capitalism doesn't appear. And we built capitalism without legal civil society. So that's what liberals mixed up. So that's what we got eventually. Capitalism without the law. And the third attempt to get outside the pre-modern times, pre-modernity. So now we're getting just to a new medieval ages. But there are grounds for that. And so what we missed, what kind of links we missed. Peter the Great, what did he miss? And the Bolsheviks, what did they skip? And the liberals, what did they skip? What they did not notice? There's this kind of lack of understanding of Russia. So what is this strange state that has lots of territories, huge, and we even don't know why we need so many territories. And so huge land that absorbed so many people, so lands, different cultures, non-Russian cultures, but altogether. What kind of amalgamation is that? What kind of substance Russia is? What is that? It's huge, bloated in lands. And so Russian philosophers try to answer this question. So what the idea of Russia is. So this I came to the word idea. The philosophers, so such idea exists and existed. So the Russian idea. So this is the central subject matter of the Russian philosophy. And what they discovered. And to this question we need to give an answer. Sociological answer or economic answer. But we know that this is a cultural answer. It's all around culture. In what sense? So where I understand where Russia's place is in history, because the Russian idea is the continuation of the Roman idea. Of the Roman, you know which countries? So that's my view, my idea. Maybe I'm just maybe it's presumptuous. Maybe I could be too schematic. But you know what countries I would say belong to the European civilization. So we will understand. So which countries I think are part of the European civilization. So that will bespeak the Russia's place. So all countries, all peoples who in their history managed to resolve one issue. One, why the first Rome fell. And I think they belong to Europe, to European countries, European culture. So who were trying just, you know, in a sense, so what was the decline of Rome? That was a seismic activity. That was the magnitude of like the moon fell on Earth. So because that was the center of the world, and all of a sudden just it falls prey to nomadic tribes. And so the historians will tell it better. So that's the nations that try to deal with this issue, why Rome fell, so they belong. Because from this question, so the Middle Ages start. The Middle Ages, the Saint Augustine, so the decline and fall of Rome. So why did Rome fall? So that's the time when the modern times start. So the change of times started when they started to try to answer why Rome fell. So Montesquieu and others, so they're trying to explain. And moreover, so this issue, this is my main question that was discussed even by the founding fathers of the United States when they were writing the Constitution. So they were even just signing this with the Roman name, Publi. So there were two answers. So why Rome fell? And you understand, so where Russia starts to bifurcate from Europe. So two questions. You will immediately see where Russia stands apart. Rome fell so because it betrayed its republican ideas. It changed its law, its civil foundation. And then the Western history, so when Rome would be replicated, so the Romans, sacred empire. So, but if you just watch the history of Europe, that was the return to the ideals of Roman Republic, the renaissance of Roman republicanism, and that's exactly wanted to do. And then all American Constitution is built on this principle: how to prevent the transfer of republic back into the regime of personal power. That's why the division of power, checks and balances, and three branches, etc. As a result of this, but there was another answer. So the main merit of Rome, from the viewpoint of Europe, what did Rome discover? So what was the Rome idea? Roman idea was that they opened up some universal, comprehensive civilization, because Rome did not dream of the world predominance. So it's not Alexander the Macedonian or Genghis Khan. So they wanted to create a global state on the principles of Roman citizenship, right? That's what Rome was dreaming of. So it discovered an idea of universal civilization. So then something should be there in the world that would unite everyone. So then they discovered the idea of law. Law is an unification of people that does not require any religious sanctions, because religion, world religions, they unite people as well, but they only within the framework of their own gods. And you don't know this watershed between different gods, because you can certainly go from one belief to another confession, but you cannot combine them together. But law expands on all of them, on all beliefs, all confessions. And Europe followed this way. Then the second answer was as follows. So Rome fell because of the lack of spirituality. Spirituality, paganism. Paganism killed Rome, which that actually undermined both the power and the citizens. And that's why And Byzantium gave this answer. So that the way out of this situation was not just leaving the empire, because Byzantium actually sanctified the empire, so that it ossified the empire. Because the Western Rome was a republic, and so then they wanted just to unite by Christianity all the empires, and so where Christianity survived until the 15th century in the Eastern Roman Empire and Byzantium. So what they discovered, because the civil society, legal, rule of law, civil society is a great thing. That's one, but it does not address all issues. It does not make a man a perfect man. It does not make him a moral man. And that's why besides civil society, they should be spirituality. This environment, ambience of spirituality must exist as well. So then to simplify it further, so this morality and law. This is so what should be at the basis of public governance, law or morality. So Byzantium was saying about the preponderance of morality over law, and this is what Russia borrowed: the preponderance, the predominance of morality over the law. And that's the root of all problems. But that's not a different truth. It's not a different truth, because we cannot address this issue. Because we always, even now, so then in a ridiculous form, we replicate this Russian idea that the predominance in the creation of society should be given to moral values, and not legal values, not the law. And this is the continuation of Roman idea, but in Russian style. And this unites us and disunites us. And to address the issue of our attitudes, I'm wrapping up already, and to address the issue of our attitude to Russia relationship with Europe, and so if you just translate it into simple language, we need to address the issue how living together, morality is related to law, morality and law, because moral values have been translated into the legal language, right? Don't steal, don't kill, so don't be lecherous, so don't desire your neighbor's wife. But the most important legal value cannot be translated into the legal language, which is So Russian philosophers, as Russian idea, they offered of this love, humility, and love of everybody. So they call it the cathedral, like a unity of the nation around. And so the Russian idea certainly then eventually got transferred to the nationalism, and so it was a utopia. It was utopia. Idea was a utopian idea. So definitely, so you cannot build a society only on the basis of the law. There will be problems too. Morality should be there as well. And I think that so then, trying to address this issue, to determine one's future, to identify one's objective, goal. I think Russia, on the one hand, certainly it was kind of clairvoyant, because Russia knew that if one day, so the world will be humane and full of morality, and because the Russian idea was universal, it was never nationalistic. The Russian idea was never nationalistic, has never been one, because the Russian civilization is unique. So we need to talk about this. Is the false idea that's a specific, philosophically wrong idea that Russian civilization is unique, because many civilizations, in my view. So it came from Toynbee and from some extent from Danielewski, but Danielewski was by profession a biologist, and so then natural sciences. So he just applied to human, so the species differences, and but the challenge is that that the Russian idea taught Russian to think universally in a tribal fashion. So like pagans. So they were teaching just to think in a large fashion, in a universal fashion. But the society is developing not only when it only just thinks only about itself, but some comprehensive ideas. Why the West is so burgeoningly developing? Because at the base there's a universal idea of legal entity, unity, and they're so full of Messiah conscience. So they just don't want just to live good, but because once they want to live well, so that's the idea ended. But when he was full of this Messiah mission, just to unite all people just by on one legal foundation and create this law equally applicable to everyone. So that's how the West started to live, but it didn't work out in Russia. And so now just to try just to route Russia's way to this unique way is to abandon the Russian idea if we want just to follow European. So we can treat it well, we can hate it, but it's not the continuation of Russian idea, but it means, and as a result, as a corollary, will be the abandonment of Russian culture as well. If we abandon the Russian idea, it means that we're different, we're good or bad, but we abandon our own culture. And that had been accumulated for many centuries. So the destruction of the Academy of Sciences is the last blow assisted on the St. Petersburgian Russia. And so we're killing the last pockets of science and intellect. And so then I will tell them, you are severing relations with the Russian culture, because the essence of Russian culture was universal and was related to the humanity. It was designed not only for Russians, it was designed for all Christian, but it was based not on law, but it was based on morality. That's the difference, morality versus the law. So how can morality be juxtaposed with the law? That's the main challenge of Russia. And Russia and Europe, so they're concerned about this issue because they look at this issue differently. So morality and the law, they're trying in Germany, so they're trying just to approach this issue from different angles, because the future is the status of morality. So it has not been addressed. And then another thing that we failed to address as well, another issue. Now, what we have not yet decided how culture can be combined with civilization, because culture has always has this pathos of universality. So then looking at something pivotal that would unite all nations, all people on a morality person. Civilization has been evolving in a different, the Spengler type. So civilization is the death of culture, Spengler said. So can we combine civilization based on market basis? So because I don't understand, no market civilization doesn't exist. So then it's based on the rule of law, civil society, on law. Can it combine it with culture? And why this civilization all of a sudden generated ecological crisis and the wars, and so that right in the West. So this is the range of questions that I would like to offer you, and I just only had time to list them.
Well, you really showed a very humanistic approach to the public. Thank you very much, and we have a Q&A for half an hour. Thank you very much for this excellent lecture. I will introduce yourself. I'm Daria Leo from Nizhny Novgorod. I would like to entertain your points a little bit further. You raised the point of freedom and the understanding of myself in history and self-identity, and recalled a book by Richard Fromm, The Escape from Freedom, and he raised also the same aspects, and he says that the loss of individuality is one of the factors that can make critical thinking paralyzed, and there are two ways. Either we take everything with skepticism and deny everything, or we show some kind of the trust, but in a kid's understanding of the word. So my question will be based on the idea described by Fromm. Thinking of Russia, he writes that the notion of socialism and the ideas that were incorporated into that word were kind of the bite or the bait because there was the society, but there was also very strong bureaucracy. And this word was used to hide the truth. And he stresses that words were never used to hide truth so much as it is done in contemporary society. So from your perspective, are there any words in Russia now on the agenda that are also used to hide the truth and that are used as a bait for people? Well, it's not the right time, and let's travel back to the Soviet times. Can you imagine what was the most commonly used word that was used in the different context and to hide the truth? And the word was Soviet. There was no Soviet power in Russia in its true meaning, because the Soviets, the councils of the people, were never in charge. It's true that we had Soviets on every level, in municipalities and cities, and there was the Supreme Soviet, but the power didn't belong to them. That was really the lie, and power belonged to the secret services. And this deception, well, it's not Russia's invention. Well, I don't think that many people really understand what Stalinism means. It's not about Stalin himself, but Stalinism is associated with the Gulag concentration camp, with purges, terror, but people never realized what was the reason for that Stalinism. They looked at Stalin as a bandit, as a gangster, but do you know what Stalinism means? It was kind of a special ideology. Stalinism is when you equalize ideas with reality. That was the deception. Now people hate even hearing such words as socialism or communism. It's like a red piece of cloth for a bull. But those are great words. Neither communism nor socialism notion was born in Russia. It was borrowed in Russia. So when Stalin said that we had built socialism, he said that 12 years after Lenin. And so even Lenin had been shocked because he would never have called the system that Stalin built as socialism. So I refer to all those people as Stalinists who believed that the socialist system was in existence in the Soviet Union. And communism, even according to Marx, is not a society. It's not a system that can be built. Nothing of the kind was offered by Marx. Communism is history, and Marx was investigating the issue how we can live in history. And people never lived in history. It were things and other notions that lived in history, but not the people. So communism, when a person starts living in history, and it means that every individual meant a society, would be in a society. It's because I communicate in one fashion with one person and differently to another person. So we used the words, but we took them in an entirely different sense. Let's switch to the contemporary times, to the modern times. Not a single current term, from my perspective, you can argue with me, not a single term corresponds to its meaning, true meaning. We say parliament. Do we have parliament? We say judiciary. Do we have judiciary the way it is meant? We say party. Do we really have political parties? Formally, we do, but when you try to check the consent, well, it's bluff. And let you think how you can term that, how we can call that. But I certain that the words that I used do not correspond to the reality. So we need to find some adequate language to speak, but it can happen only if you are allowed to, since those systems that we are having, the one they are having now, does not allow people to speak an adequate language. In the Soviet Union, we used to say that it was the most humanistic or fair country in the world, which was not true. So the adequate language is something that differs this system from other more conventional systems. And the system of arbitrary rule, when no rights are observed, when everything is determined from top, when the system is built on propaganda. I'm not a great speaker to mention all those things, but such systems and regimes will never speak adequate language. And the reason why you cannot comprehend Russia, really. I'm Yelena Lushkova from St. Petersburg. Okay, so as a follow-up question about Stalinism, Professor Zubov spoke before us yesterday, and he said that it was very important for us to get rid of all communist past and get rid of all totalitarian signs, and he offered very arguable means, such as the removal of monuments. And don't you think that if you remove monuments, you will just forget your history, and then there will be a danger that you will repeat that history, so that history will not have any future, but it will be just a repetition after repetition. So in your view, how can we really get rid of communist and socialist past and heritage? So that to avoid those repetitions and misinterpretation. Really, I have a deep respect for Professor Zubov as for a scholar and as a personality, but I strongly disagree with him on many occasions. First of all, he really overemphasizes the fact that the problem, he really believes that all the problems started after October Revolution. Prior to October Revolution, everything was fine in Russia, but I would like to recall him of the fact that it was not the Bolsheviks who started the revolutions. It was started by the liberals who overthrew the Tsar and the system. There was the revolution in February. I would agree with Berdyaev's idea that there were not two revolutions, February and October, but that was one. First revolution, or the revolution, is started by more moderate forces and is ended as completed by radicals. And there is a great number of works saying that every revolution starts with some overture and ends up with a single-party system. So a revolution starts with freedom and ends up with totalitarianism, and it was well described in the German classic philosophy. So it's not like as simple as that. But the core problem is that how we can get rid of communist past. Professor Zubov believes that the core of the evil is the ideology of communism. I think Stalin is not the problem. Stalin was the main anti-communism of the 20th century. He was the strongest anti-communist because he disbanded Comintern, that Communist International. No matter what you think of Stalin, but it's a fact. And communism of Lenin, profited by Lenin, was also under question. And why did communism became that popular word? It was after the Third International, when the Communist International began spreading the power of Bolsheviks through the rest of the world. And it was the mistake of the people of 1990s who believed and come into my idea, who said that Russia was to be saved from Marxism and communism, and that's exactly what those people were doing. But my idea is totally contrary. I think that Marxism and communism are to be saved from Russia, from the misinterpretation, and liberalism is also to be saved from Russia. because we are not a country. We are the cemetery of all the ideas. The moment idea comes to Russia, it evolves as a caricature and a misinterpretation. And you should understand why. I'm told that all Asian Marxism is like that. That's correct. But Marxism was never designed for Asia. It was designed for the United Kingdom. I'm not saying that Marx opened 100% truth. Marxism is obsolete in many respects. But what was the mistake of Marx was the combination of Marxism and the working movement. There are two components that do not go together. And Marx never believed he was a socialist, and in all his works he wrote critical things about socialism. And it's kind of a utopia. I agree, it's utopia that says that, and I can explain to you why it is a utopia. The core idea of communism is that it's free time, not working time, should serve the basis for any society. So that theory teaches how you live in your free time, not in your busy hours. It's not about economics. It's not about sharing all the property and assets. If it says that all assets belong to everybody, then it cannot be the case. It can be said only about abstract things. So I would offer another idea. You understand that I derive from the Russian culture, and I'm not an opponent to Russia, but I'm quite critical about many things that are taken